What's going on, Bengals fans? Chris Daughtery here with another edition of Bengals Breakdown. And coming up on today's show, we're going to talk about the Bengals injury report and how that should help them in that game this week versus the Denver Broncos on Monday Night Football. We're also going to ask a couple of questions about this Bengals team before that matchup on Monday night. Before we get into that, though, what is your confidence level in this Bengals team going to Denver and getting a win? You can be honest, get down there in the comments section and let me know what you guys think. Scale it for me 1 to 10, 1 on the low end, 10 on the high end. Get down there and scale your confidence level in the Cincinnati Bengals. All right, let's get into this injury report here for the Bengals. This came out on Friday and Saturday as well. Noah Fant and Shemar Stewart, both of them are going to be out in this game. Fant, unfortunately, got a concussion last week, so you know how that can be. You know, sometimes it could be a multi-week thing, but Noah Fant's going to be out. I would assume this might be the last game out for Shemar Stewart as well, but we'll continue to follow that ankle injury there. Zac Taylor also saying Taylor-Britt will play in this game on Monday Night Football. The extra day definitely helps him out on that front as well. Samaje Perine also going to be probable for this game with that thumb injury, and Dalton Risner also going to be good to go most likely on Monday night with that calf injury. I think the biggest thing out of all of these guys, we're going to talk about a couple of these injuries here. Let's start off with Noah Fant. You know, he has been the number 3 receiver on this team. I know he's a tight end, but he's number 3 in receiving yards on this team behind T. Higgins and Jamar Chase being 2 and 1, technically the order I give it to you there. But he has been a really big, factor for the Bengals so far this year. He's even tied with T. Higgins, number 2 on the team, with 14 targets. He's been one of the favorite targets so far for Jake Browning. So he's going to most likely just have to switch it up, go after or go towards somebody else. And look, Mike Gesicki, I thought he was going to be a little bit better to start the season, but they just really haven't gone his way. I think he's got 10 targets or something like that here to start the season. But, he's going to have to make a big impact for this Bengals team, especially on the offensive side of the ball. They have been struggling the past couple of weeks. Jake Browning has got to find some of those targets consistently if the Bengals want a chance to win this ball game on Monday night. Over to the defensive side of the ball. You're also a little bit healthier now. In that cornerback room, Taylor-Britt is expected to play. DJ Turner, who also was banged up a little bit last week, did go in last week's game, but I think he was hindered a little bit still. I think he was dealing with a hamstring injury as well. And, look, CTB has had an up and down time here with the Cincinnati Bengals. And the first 2 games, especially, the first game versus the Browns, he was really, really bad. There wasn't really anybody for this Bengals secondary that was, you could go out there and say, hey, this guy had a good game. On the other side, against the Jags, he actually did do a very good job. Was targeted 3 times, didn't give up a single reception in that game. And, like I always say, you can take PFF grades with a little bit of a grain of salt, but I think that really shows exactly how he, played in both of those games. Not very good against the Browns. He had a 36.3 PFF coverage grade. Against the Jags, 86.2. So you're going to have Taylor-Britt really step up for this Bengals defense, because right now the defense is actually who you're really relying on. And that's not something that I thought I would say coming into this season. So as of right now, who do you trust more? Type O if it's the offense, or type D if you trust the defense more right now? It's honestly, in my opinion, kind of trust the defense a little bit more. I think they've played a little bit better so far this year than they actually did last year. But I want to hear from you guys down at the pinned comment of today's video. Who do you trust more right now for the Bengals? Type O for offense or D for defense. All right, another thing that I wanted to talk about with Samaje Perine being good to go for this game coming up on Monday night. I would like to see a little bit more of him in this ball game. He had that 3rd and 12, rushed for 12 yards, ended up getting the first down. Only had 4 carries in that game the other day, but did have 21 yards. With Chase Brown just not really being as efficient as you would like him to be. Obviously, a lot of that has to do with the offensive line as well. But I want to see a little bit more of Perine, maybe even a little bit more of Taj Brooks as well. And that's not me saying I totally want to go away from Chase Brown, but I do think mixing in these running backs could help the Bengals offense out a lot. And right now, you're just really looking for somebody else to step up on this Bengals offensive side of the ball, because you're going up against a very, very good defense in the Denver Broncos. All right, I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's video. That is Omaha Steaks. Right now, during the Red Hot Sales event, you guys can get 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners here at Bengals Breakdown also get an additional $35 off just by using promo code Bengals at checkout. So that's 50% off site-wide, plus an additional $35 off just by using promo code Bengals at checkout. Enjoy USDA-certified tender steaks, juicy burgers, cozy and convenient comfort meals, plus tailgating favorites like chicken wings, smash burgers, and big deli-style franks. Omaha Steaks offers unrivaled quality and variety, and every bite is backed by their 100% guaranteed. Right now is the perfect time to stock up with exceptional handcrafted flavor and convenience of Omaha Steaks. Get fired up for fall grilling with Omaha Steaks just by going to omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide right now during the Red Hot Sales event. And our listeners here at Bengals Breakdown also get an additional $35 off just by using promo code Bengals at checkout. They've got a bunch of different types of bundles and things that you can choose from, whether it's steak, whether it's chicken. They've even got desserts on there as well. So just go to omahasteaks.com and get 50% off site-wide during their Red Hot Sales event, and also get an additional $35 off just by using promo code Bengals at checkout. You guys can also go to their website to see more details on that as well. All right, I've got a couple questions for this Bengals team as they go into Monday Night Football. Number one here, I think my biggest question for this team is, can the Bengals offensive line hold up against this Denver, front 5, 6, 7, whatever you want to call it there? They got a lot of guys on this defensive front that have been going off so far in this season. I think the only Bengals offensive lineman that had, which you could maybe even call a decent game against the Vikings, was Amarius Mims. Everybody else was pretty putrid, and we'll get to some of those numbers here in just a second. But, like I said, these Broncos defenders have had an insane start to the season. I think they've got like 87 pressures, I believe that number was, from Pro Football Focus for this Broncos front here. Nick Bonitto's having himself a great start to the season. So is Jonathan Cooper. Some of those interior guys like DJ Jones, man, some of those stats may not necessarily, he doesn't necessarily have a ton of pressures, but he is doing the things that you want from defensive tackles, whether that's just blowing up the defensive line so the running backs have to go a different direction. You don't necessarily get any kind of stats for that, but that's some of those things that this these Denver defensive tackles are doing that is really, really helping out their defense so far this year. And look, the Broncos are only a couple plays away right now from being 3-0. They've lost the last 2 weeks on game-losing field goals at the very, very end of the game. So I'll be honest, I am really nervous about this game, especially against this this Cincinnati offensive line right now. We go back to that game versus the Vikings. Man, I thought Orlando Brown had a just tough game overall. You can see the PFF grades right here, both in pass protection and run blocking. Orlando Brown had a really, really bad game. And I think even, when you go back and you actually look at these specific, PFF stats, giving up sacks, pressures, hits, things like that, I don't really think that those do it justice about how bad Orlando Brown was. Now, he did say this week, he acknowledges that he had a, really, really bad game last week, and they're, doing the things that you want them to do to turn things around. But, like I've said before, talk is fine, but you got to go out there, and you really do have to show it on the field as well. Dylan Fairchild, you picked him with a top 100 pick this year. He's had a lot of ups and downs so far this year as well. He had a really bad game against the Vikings. And then Ted Karras as well, the guy that you signed to the 1-year extension just before the season began. He's had a really bad start to the season as well. So, I mean, it sucks because, this Bengals offensive line, they get, the blame for Joe Burrow, constantly running around and eventually getting injured. And it's, at some point, I know a lot of people want to go out there and they want to, blame it on the organization. But at some point, these guys have got to step up, and they've just got to play better football at the end of the day. Lucas Patrick ended up getting hurt on that second drive of the season. They signed Dalton Risner to, he was the best free agent offensive guard out there, and he really hasn't been very good either so far this year. So it sounds like there might even be a chance that Jalen Rivers might be the guy that goes out there at that right guard spot for the Cincinnati Bengals this week. We'll see if they start with Dalton Risner or with Jalen Rivers, but I think at some point, Dalton Risner isn't playing good. If they end up going that direction and starting him, I do think there is an opportunity to see Jalen Rivers in this game this week. So let me know, if you were Zac Taylor or just yourself, if you were the head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals, who would you start at that right guard spot? Type D for Dalton Risner or J for Jalen Rivers. All right, my last question here before we get out of here is about Zac Taylor. Show us that you can actually win games without Joe Burrow. It's been pretty bad when Joe Burrow hasn't been out there for the Bengals. And, you've had some of those games where Jake Browning, goes into the game, kind of catches the other team off guard, and you can end up winning some of those games. But, games like this are going to be big question marks at the end of the season, or maybe even during the season if it just keeps going the way that, last week was for the Cincinnati Bengals. I think games like this really are going to be a big picture, discussion if you want to bring Zac Taylor back for next year as your head coach. So, can he scheme things up for Jake Browning? So far, I even saw a thing the other day. I don't remember if it was James Rapine or somebody else that was doing one of those film breakdowns after the game. They're basically saying, when the Bengals are in kind of a 12 personnel set and they put one of the tight ends in motion, it's a power play up the middle every single time for the past 3 years. They haven't had any kind of, change off of those types of plays. A lot of times, the way football works is if you have formations, you have a play that, you go off of that formation, and then later on in the game or later on in the season, you run a different play off of that same type of formation to kind of trick the defense. Well, it doesn't really seem like the Cincinnati Bengals team, especially on the offensive side of the ball, are doing anything like that. So I want to see some different stuff from this Bengals offense. Mix it up a little bit. Set yourself up for success. Help Jake Browning out and get the damn ball to your playmakers like T. Higgins, like Jamar Chase, and hopefully the Bengals can score some points in this one.